Moving right along, West Coast Eagles, they've been building. They were good against the Cats last week, but they got the win they badly needed against the Bombers Friday night.
And there's a late surge from the Bombers, and it was a good game of footy up to a half-time. The Bombers looked like they were on top at different stages. 2 metre Peter, what an outstanding season he's having. In the last couple of weeks, he had 8 shots on goal. And then what caught my eye too was Rutten's comments in his press conference saying that when the Eagles raised the bar, Essendon just weren't up for it. And that's a little bit concerning because, yes, there's an argument last week potentially that Essendon could lead into this and get ahead of themselves after what was a good win, but they shouldn't have been. And West Coast, we talked about last week, actually they're improving. It felt like they were where Essendon were a couple of weeks ago, but it's a big loss for Essendon. That would have been full of confidence, go over there. They've allowed Kennedy to have his best game in, we'll touch on that later, in a long time. But it was... he's right. They just didn't have a next level to go to once that they were actually challenged by West Coast, who have been travelling poorly.
You shouldn't lose games like that. On the back of the win last week, you go over there, and whether it's close or not, you just got to find a way to win, and they couldn't do that, which says a fair bit about the group.
It does. They start seasons really poor every year, and I think that's a mental fragility that they've got as a football club. And I think that even they get their win, and we hear Merritt this time last week, so we improved defensively. But to see these numbers, so West Coast hadn't kicked over 100 points for 28 games. They do that against the Bombers. Josh Kennedy hadn't kicked 5 for 38 games. They do that against the Bombers. Cripps hadn't kicked 3 in 15. He does it. And Willie Rioli, can find some form in the best 2 players when he hasn't done that. So I honestly, I think Ben Rutten should be under pressure for his job. I just think that why does Carlton last year be the worst defence in the comp? Or one of them under David Teague, and within the space of a pre-season, Michael Voss now has his team in the top 4. The Bombers make the finals last year, now are 3 wins and 11 losses, and were pulled apart by a team who has struggled to score all year and concede over 100 points. So, I think something has to give at Essendon. I think they've taken this probably, some will say we're doing it pretty well because we're not, trying to look like we're falling apart as a football club. But also you can be too... just roll along with the accepting, and that's where I think they're being too accepting with where it's at the moment.
When they had against Hawthorn, it was celebrated, wasn't it? Yeah. And then they fell away again. The win against St Kilda was celebrated, and then almost convincing they're on the right track. But are you saying, Lotto, that this review that Paul Brush has somehow called for out of nowhere and then shut down inside 24 hours may actually have a pointier end to it than what we're led to believe?
I want a proper review. I want a review for everyone to look at what's going wrong at the club and why it's been so mediocre for so long. And there is a man called Alastair Clarkson sitting there looking for a job. And could he be the thing that wakes up this football club from its slumber that it's been for so long? I'm not sure what you think, BJ.
An external review rather than an internal review?
It's just frustrating just seeing what they serve up time after.
I tend to agree with external review, but I just don't see them going back to the coaching well and going with an untried coach. Like, that's another big risk.
Clarkson,
Pardon?
Clarkson?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. If surely they've had a conversation. Like Nick Riewoldt talked about it a few weeks ago, that every club should at least have a conversation with Alastair Clarkson. There might be a few exceptions, a couple of coaches that you're not going to move on, but every club, because of what he's available, clearly, and then what he's done, and you know what you're going to get from him, everyone, it would be naive not to have a conversation with him. And
you don't just bring a
that's the only person for mine that can come in, because I don't think you can replace Ben Rutten with another untried coach, because there's too much grey area, and then you potentially put the team back another 2 or 3 years. Ben could turn into a great coach in 2 or 3 years if he's given the time.
But just, when you mean Clarkson, it's not just as simple as bringing him in. He coaches the club. He effectively becomes the chairman. He becomes the CEO. Becomes.
Is that a good thing, though?
Well, that's then predicated on the people around the club who made the decisions.
Was that one of his knockbacks at Hawthorn, potentially towards the end of his career, that he
did everything
with a bit of a control freak?
Yeah, and that's a bigger decision and a discussion, isn't it? I mean, do you
I'll
think
take
that's
the
what it needs?
knockbacks to win 4 flags. I'm happy to take those knockbacks to win 4 flags.